It's the Practical Prayer Podcast on the New Thought Media Network. And here we are again, having a day. It's Bill over here and Carol over there. And I apparently erroneously dressed in black, even though it's the end of summer. So, well.
Actually, black is a year-round color. And as I said to you, I had my little black shirt out. In fact, part of my, can't see it, but part of what I do have is black. And I thought, I can't do that, I can't do that. You know, because that's what I'm doing in the winter. Heads up.
Right.
So,
Well, yeah, and I'm not looking forward to the end of summer. I've been enjoying summertime and the casualness of summertime.
me too.
I mean, I wander around with
No way, I think I need a
with
little
bare feet all year round, but I just don't have to change something when I go outside.
Yeah. You know what I was feeling the other day? I probably need to get a little more structure because I'm just getting really laid back and liking it a little too much. You
Well, enjoy yourself. See what happens.
know? Yeah. A friend of mine asked me to go somewhere and I refused because I knew it meant that I was going to have to get dressed up. More, more dressed up than I wanted. And I did kind of want to go, but I said, nah, not doing it.
Good
So,
for you.
didn't do it.
Yeah, I've been doing memorial services and weddings, and that's pretty much my dress-up event.
Yeah, well, you're having a good time, and you know I can't wait to talk to you about it later.
My favorite last-minute brides.
Brides? You
Last-minute
said brides.
brides. I said last-minute brides. Yeah. Yeah, I
All
mean,
brides are
I
last
could.
minute, aren't they?
No, there are brides who are preparing and planning their weddings a year out now, year and a half,
Oh, but there's
and
always
doing it.
still everybody seems like it's last minute. At least
Yeah,
that
but
has
when you're
been
trying to
my
book the officiant for your
experience.
wedding, 2 weeks ahead of time, that's weird.
Things are done so much differently now than they used to be. it's just it's just really incredible. You know, I just sit back or stand back and look and say, wonder how this is going to turn out. Just so different.
Yep. So let me make mention of the fact that we are recording the Practical Prayer Podcast on New Thought Media Network, and we are open to comments that you put in on your social media feed if you're watching us live. If you're watching us live, or if you're enjoying the recording and you want to feed something back in our direction, you can go to bethelight.com, be-the-light.com. And there it is on the screen there. And there you will find a little section about the Practical Prayer Podcast and the ability to click the make a comment or ask a question or request a prayer controls in there. And we will respond accordingly. In other words, if you're enthusiastic and excited about it, then we will be too.
I'm gonna be, listen. I come here enthusiastic.
Yes, you do.
Yes, I'm still so excited about New Thought. It's ridiculous. So, and not a bit less than I was first day.
Yep.
Come on, in.
You're like a bottle of champagne that doesn't lose its fizz. You're
That's
still
it.
bubbly 2 years
That's
later. That's you.
that's it. That's it.
That's you. All right. So we did not discuss what we're going to discuss today. What are we going to discuss today? Or do you want to surprise me when we get into the
Well,
podcast episode?
listen. It doesn't matter because you're gonna know how to deal with it anyway. So that's why I always think I ain't gotta worry about it. He'll grab it and run. Like you're the genius in this thing. I'm the student, just glad to be here. Let me just say, what student gets to be with their teacher a whole solid hour once a week? Teachers are busy. I get to be with you. Okay, so you want to know what we're going to talk about? I just went
Yeah.
off on this trail. Let me get back.
I was just flashing back to when I was in middle school and high school when I could spend an hour with a teacher just by misbehaving. And they'd sit me down while they did paperwork and I would just have to cower over in the side of the room. But that's not what you meant.
Yeah, that's great. One day we'll even talk about that. Because I think the sizzle of learning and being with your teacher is I don't feel it. With a lot of places that I go, and I just wonder what happened And the other thing that I'm energized also by reading ancient literature, sacred texts, and all that. And
Hmm.
it's exciting to sit with the Buddha, in the way I look at things, and it's just amazing. So when I come into the real world and nobody's excited about anything, I'm thinking, what's wrong with you?
Okay, so last chance to tell me what the topic is before you surprise me in the middle of the episode.
Oh, okay. So I was thinking about the World Council of Religion, and
Uh,
that's the
the,
last
the,
one you
the,
went to,
the,
right?
the Parliament, yes, the Parliament
The
of the World's
Parliament.
Religions.
I'll get it all together. And I just thought about how many were there, because I've seen some videos and things like that. And the similar, or the thread, I call it the thread that runs through them all. And prayer, of course, is that. And it would be really nice to talk about that if you're not like all talked out about
Thread between all religions. Actually, I think that's a great one. That
that.
is
Yeah,
actually a great one.
I see it, feel it, and we can wait. But that's it.
Well, no, let's do that because I happen to have my printed copy of Towards a Global Ethic, which is the
Okay.
little, the shortest document they've ever created. It's only 16 pages long.
Short.
Yeah, it's concise. It's an outline. It's an overview. There's not one of the people who was attending at that particular event who's ever at a loss for words.
I think that comes along with being, a religious leader or something. It might be something like
Oh, I agree.
writing it with the religion.
Yeah, and then there's, my favorite joke is, what does it mean when a minister looks at his watch? Nothing.
Nothing.
Absolutely
You know,
nothing. It means nothing.
I used to pride myself on being able to do a sermon 20 minutes without looking at the clock, flat, something just inside, cut it off at 20 minutes. And I was a guest preacher at one event, and they said, don't come here with that 20 minutes, though. And I'm not going to tell you all the rest of what they said, but they said, don't do that. And they told me how long I was expected to preach that sermon. I said, okay, no problem. I started it out with a long one, and I worked my way down to 20 minutes. I was really proud of that. I thought the world was going that way, which it did, but at that
Hmm.
time it hadn't. And so,
Mark Twain very famously once said, I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have time. Which is true. You could take the ideas and you just do that. My lovely daughter calls it word vomit. Uh, just have it go and go and go. Or you can spend some time thinking about where it is that you want to lead and what to start with and do some organizing and then get the same ideas much more concisely in a way that's easier to understand. And it really honors the people who are listening. And I won't use that term again.
well, you got to do that. If not, people aren't going to hear you anymore. It's just, they have things to do. Something
Yeah.
from
Well, and for me personally, last little comment about before we start the podcast episode. When I record a God call, they come out at 30 seconds. I mean, I begin, I end, I tell the story, and they're 30 seconds long. When I was in the advertising business and I was writing radio commercials, they all, when I stopped writing and I read through them, 60 seconds.
You could do it if once you get
Practice,
your
practice,
mind wrapped
practice.
around it. It's something. Yes, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. All right. The threads between all religions coming up right after the show intro. Here we go.
A practical prayer is a prayer that works.
These discussions between Reverend Bill Marchiony and Carol Lawrence dive into the details of how it works and how to work it.
Reverend Bill is a New Thought minister and the author of Practical Prayer for Real Results.
Your new life begins with a new thought.
Carol Lawrence is on a spiritual quest, finding the New Thought teaching after decades on the pulpit in 3 different traditional denominations.
I've got some questions.
Together, they're exploring the philosophy and activities that come together from many of the world's religions to create the practical spirituality that is New Thought.
to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol Lawrence here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony.
And we have a wonderful opportunity today to talk about, you're currently fascinated with my attendance at the Parliament of the World Religions a week or so back, and want to talk about the thread between all religions, which I think is awesome.
Yes, and when you do that, I want you to, at some point, and I'm sure we will, put some emphasis on the prayers, that thread that goes through all religions. The prayer. Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
well,
yeah.
when I was having conversations with people of, different denominations, the Muslim and the Baha'i and the Latter-day Saints and the Sikhs and the pagans, they would very politely ask what my spiritual tradition is. And when I said New Thought, as often as not, they had to say, well, what's that? So I got to explain New Thought, and I spent the week in Chicago fine-tuning my elevator pitch on what is New Thought. And I describe it as the greatest hits of all the world's religions. If you take the best of all the religions and combine it together, then you wind up with New Thought. And the idea is to love like Jesus, and meditate like Buddha, and pray like Muhammad, and believe like Abraham. And if that's the starting point, then there's a lot of potential there. And not rule out anybody's, and then go in a little deeper and talk about the prayer practice that we use is the same one that's in all the religions. You find the most effective prayers in all the religions, and you get somebody like Ernest Holmes to go through and say, well, what do they all have in common? What's the formula for the ones that are really working well? And then the teaching is, do that. Use that formula, because it's likely to make a really effective prayer. And you can be as effective as the Lord's Prayer or the Shema or the Fatiha or whatever. There's the possibility for the prayers to be as effective as any prayer can possibly be. And the interesting thing at the Parliament is that when you get into a conversation with somebody about, well, what's your tradition? What's your spiritual practice? What's your religion? There are two ways for the person who asks the question to be engaged. One is to be listening to the answer, to try and have an understanding of the different framework and model and perspective that the person they're talking to is. And the other one is waiting until the first person stops talking so they can convince them that their way is better. And there were some of them there. Not a lot, because the people who go to the Parliament of the World Religions are actually interested in other religions besides just their own. But there are a fair number of them. And in one of the panels, Michael Beckwith was talking about believers, and he was talking about embodiment, and this is how we move together as part of that global ethic. And he said a believer who hasn't embodied their belief becomes a radical, trying to get others to accept their beliefs. So if I'm owning my own stuff, I can talk to other people about it for, well, let's see, we're at 118 episodes now, and I can keep going. And if somebody I don't need somebody else to agree with me. I'm very confident in what it is that I'm talking about, and I'm happy to invite other people in. That's a large part of my mission. But if somebody's got a spiritual practice that's working for them, God bless them. Go to it.
Yeah, but that's a big thing, I mean, I'm sure we can talk about the ego and how that's all mixed in, and I always say that you've got to put the ego under control or put a leash on it. You're not going to get rid of it, but to at least put a leash on him long enough to be able to have some intelligent discourse about religion. And that's one of the things that I do kind of feel bad about not going or being able to go to those things, because I want to be in conversation with people that aren't angry with other people because they don't believe the same way. It just, it's happenstance. We're born, most of us are born into a certain faith tradition. We don't make a choice. Sometimes we make a choice later, but for the most part, people are born into it. Or you're born into a certain part of the world where that particular faith belief is. And not to be flippant and say it's like just coincidental, but when you find out that there are other people that are in other faith traditions and got there by the same way you got into yours, like birth, like geography, that kind of thing, how do you get like nasty and angry because and say mine is the best and mine is the only. That one just tripped me up quite a lot.
Yeah.
And so I
It's
found that I had less and less to talk about in the faith tradition that I was in because it was just too many contradictions in terms of being ugly with other people because of their beliefs. And it just like so happened. And the funny part is, my mother was Baptist turned Pentecostal. My father was a diehard AME. So I was born into like a pot of stew, a
mixed
wonderful
a
pot of
mixed
stew.
household.
Yeah. So where does that leave me? Who do I argue for? And yeah, it I don't go down that road, but it seems to be the same thing. So I'm really fascinated and delighted to hear stories about how people were able to talk to each other without, you know, getting ready to beat each other up and
Yeah,
all
well,
that.
and that's what Beckwith was saying is, if we're not comfortable in where we are, if we haven't embodied where we are, then we're going to want to like make other people believe the way that we believe, because making them agree with us makes us right.
Which,
It'd be
and
nice
suppose
if
you're,
everybody agreed with me.
but suppose you're like all the way wrong.
Well,
Then what? It just means like,
then we'll
it's like
both be all the
an
way wrong.
argument. It's like a big argument that you're having with somebody, and they are they're loud talking you. And I always would kind of smile at that because you're loud, right? And if you're wrong, then you're loud and wrong. So who wins the argument isn't based on who can, you know, win the argument. There is no win here, I don't think. The only win is that we shake hands or embrace, or I understand you and you understand me, and listen. We want to make sure we mark our calendars for our next meeting so we can fill in all the things that we didn't understand this time. But we're not mad.
Mm-hmm.
We're not mad.
You reminded me of a story my brother tells. He and my nephew, when my nephew was a teenager, were having a disagreement about something, and my brother starts raising his voice, and he's yelling and he's screaming, and his son finally says, "Dad, I can hear you. I just don't agree with you." It's like, what do you say to that? Yeah, yeah.
Oh, well. But
And
it's yeah. Go ahead.
the willingness to hear each other is the part that's the most important. And there's a thing that they did at the Parliament, which is a global ethic, and they've been working on this for the last 30 years, which was the resumption of the modern Parliament of the world religions. And they got it to the point where it's on a T-shirt, and it's respect for life, economic justice, truth and compassion, women's rights, and care for the earth. And the fact that they can take their 16-page global ethic summary and put it on the back of a T-shirt is pretty amazing. And everybody can agree with those things, that those things are important. A lot of people disagree with how we're going about doing them and what that means inside of my particular family or faith tradition or country. So, but those are all great things to aspire to. Economic justice, truth and compassion, women's rights, care for the earth, respect for life. There's nothing bad in there. We take a term like empathy and compassion. And who's not in favor of empathy and compassion? Everybody's in favor of empathy and compassion, except when you shorthand it as woke. You can then fight with it.
Short-handed as well. Yeah.
Isn't that what woke means? It means that as I'm doing something, I want to consider how it's going to land on other people, especially the people who are disadvantaged, the people who have been at the bottom of a power differential before. And is it more convenient if I'm at the top of the power differential to not have to pay attention to who's getting crushed under me? Of course. Of course it is. But that's not empathy and compassion.
It,
That's
it's
my
not.
bull in your
It's
china shop.
yeah. And it's like, what's in it for me? Right? What is in it for me to give up my position of power and make room for you? What's in it for me? Nothing economic for the most part, but
Hmm.
in terms of humanity and our relationship with everything is in it for you. But our values have to be readjusted or examined and readjust it, because I mean we're just so far away from this center that you're talking about, those things that are on the T-shirt.
Oh
Finding
yeah.
a way back is tough. You know, just I'm not sure. I'm. It's possible. It's just going to take a minute.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because there's a lot of fear of loss. What am I going to lose if I do it this way? If I lose the argument, you know, well, you lose the argument. You don't lose anything else.
Right. I had a friend who was a New Thought minister, and he at the time he had a day job, so he was working in sales for a chemical company. So he did a lot of driving around on behalf of the chemical company, and he was also teaching classes for a church in New York and another one in Princeton and another one in Baltimore. So he was driving around all the time, sharing this teaching, shining the light, and he was really good at it. And when he retired from the chemical job, they had a big send-off for him, and I was talking to him after that. I said, won't it be interesting if you find out that the impact that you had at this time was not nearly so much about the teaching that you did as the amount of gas you burned?
What did he
Because
say?
we're all he understood. We're all doing our best. We're all doing what we're guided to do, and it's always balance. It's like, what am I gonna offer up here? What am I looking for? What do I want to contribute? What do I want to have happen? And to me, it's the same thing that happens at the Parliament of the World Religions when 7,000 people get together, and that was their number. I think it might have been less, but they said 7,000 people through there. If you get together with somebody who's of a different background or faith, and you try and argue with them to convince them that you're right, or that you've got something going on, or even that you've got a good point, you know, they don't need to give theirs up, but to agree and support you. That brings a lot of tension and energy in. Whereas if we approach the same thing with curiosity, let me understand more about you and how you're going to get to those 5 things that are on the T-shirt, and what you are doing in your day-to-day life and in your practice that gets you closer to the infinite and gets you more fully on the path that you are desiring to be on. Because sometimes they're on a great path, and it's wonderful to hear their story. You know, a vegetarian lunch every day that I was there, served by the Sikhs for free. Which was an impressive operation, because it was 2,000 or 3,000 meals a day that they were serving for free. But also the reminder that it's vegetarian, which has much less impact on the global ecosystem than a meat-based diet does. And they weren't pontificating about it. They were just serving vegetarian food. You know, there was a lot of people who were discussing that it takes 16 pounds of grain to make a pound of meat. And is it possible that when I'm eating, you know, hamburgers or steaks with my family, that means that there's 15 families that are going hungry? Not exactly. There's a distribution problems going on now, but that's something to think about. You grow a pound of beef, it takes 75 times as much land as a pound of tofu. Now, I'm not a huge fan of tofu, but it's an interesting point. You know, similar things with water and energy and methane and. Does that mean we all need to be vegetarians and never eat meat again? Don't think so. That's a heavy lift. But can we be sensitive and compassionate and understand, well, there might be a good vegetarian choice that won't even feel like I'm giving anything up? Let me listen. Let me be curious. Let me have some empathy for people who are going through something different, and see if there's a call in there for me to change something.
Yeah, but then you hit it right on the head at the end of your comments. You said, if there's a call for me to change something, what am I, if I listen to you and you make sense, I might have to change.
Oh,
You know?
perish the thought.
But it's okay. You know, I think it's fundamentally, I think you have to locate yourself in the universe. I'm about like not even this much,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in the universe. And the universe is everything. So my opinion, while it's important to me, is not, it has no impact on evolution or how the planets rotate or anything. It's mine, it's important to me. And if I look at it like that, I don't feel so threatened, you know, because you have yours, I have mine, and I can listen to you, you know. And like, I got this thing about learning stuff, you know that. So I'll listen to you. And if yours sounds better than mine, I'll run it through my gear a couple times. I'm cool with changing. I really am.
Hmm.
If it sounds better. If it doesn't, I'll just hold on to it and see if it makes sense down the road.
Right.
But it
Or
doesn't
did
change
wait
it.
wait until I'm out of the room and then make fun of me. I can't believe he believes this.
Nah, don't do that. I don't see
He
that.
can't. He
Because
can't.
it's
It
so
doesn't
much.
help.
It's so much to know. Do you know? Um, and then here's my thing about the ocean. You know, I love the ocean, and I look at the ocean as infinite intelligence. Now, and of course, understanding that, as far as my eye can see, is nothing compared to the oceans that are on this planet. But that's the big for me. And there's so much in there to know. I only know a little bit, and you know a lot, and another person knows a lot. And so I get to know a little bit more. You know, it's just not that big a deal to me to be right. I like to make sense. You
Hmm.
know, I do like things that make sense. And if it doesn't, I may hold it to the side a minute. But it doesn't have to be my way.
Yeah. Well, even if you're just asking good questions to allow more light to come in so that people who have been on the path that you've been on can understand what's going on for somebody who's been on a different path in a different way, there's a gift there. There's magic there.
And, you know, here's a biggie for me. How's that working out for you? It's not working, but you won't change it? Okay.
Right.
Got it.
Right. That's the definition of insanity. Let's take a break, and then when we resume, I want to talk about polishing your heart.
Learn to put practical prayer to work in your life. The steps are simple to learn and let you begin to get real results to create the life of your dreams immediately. Reverend Bill Marchiony's widely acclaimed book, Practical Prayer for Real Results, gives you a clear summary of the New Thought principles behind practical prayer and the series of easy-to-understand steps found in the most effective prayers from religions and spiritual practices all over the world and throughout history. Practical prayer is not a replacement for your religion or practice. It's a technique to make the work you do in consciousness even more effective. The book includes 40 prayers on various topics that you can adapt as needed and use as your own. Practical Prayer for Real Results is available in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook on Amazon or at b-the-light.com. That's b-the-light.com.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony. And you
We're
said
talking
we
about,
were-
yeah, we're talking about different religions. The thread between all religions is, as I came to understand it, even just a little bit better at the Parliament of World Religions. And I was going to talk about polishing your heart, because in my shorthand explanation of New Thought, and when I say love like Jesus, meditate like Buddha, pray like Muhammad, and believe like Abraham or Moses. I mean, the people who like go in with nothing and like get to believe something brand new, pretty impressive. So one of the things that I noticed about the Parliament of the World Religions is that the people who were doing presentations just love to talk. They want to take everything that's in their head, everything that they know, and share it with the audience that's there. So when there was a keynote presentation, there was somebody on the stage with a PowerPoint spitting out a whole bunch of ideas. When there was a panel, there were a whole bunch of people, and they all took turns doing that, and then maybe there was time for questions and answers at the end. When there was a workshop, they would say that they're going to do something interactive, and then they would spend the entire time talking about their stuff because they wanted to make sure to cover everything. So I went to a workshop on Muslim prayer practice, and because this is serious, you know, the chime, the bell rings in the tower first thing in the morning, and everybody gets up. That's the call to prayer, and you do your first prayer, and then there's 4 more times that it happens every day. And the woman who was doing the workshop, which wound up being much more of a presentation than an interactive workshop, because we did not do a ritual hand or foot washing, and we didn't roll out any mats or bow down in any particular direction. We heard about it from her perspective and what she had going on, and her commitment was delightful. And she told the story about when she was a young adult, she didn't have a practice, and she decided that she wanted to get back into doing her practice. And she followed her willingness and her resistance. She decided, I want to do the prayers every day. And the first day she overslept. Right through the first in the morning call to prayer. And the second day, she did the same thing. She was up when she heard it, but she just said, I don't want to, and she went back to sleep. And she did a prayer. She set the intention that if this is my practice to do, then I'm going to be available to it. And the next morning, 15 minutes before the call to prayer, she was wide awake. There was no chance for her to go back to sleep. It's like, okay, thank you, God. This is mine to do. And she went and did that. And has been doing it richly ever since. And she's the one who said that her prayer practice was like polishing her heart 5 times a day. And I love that idea, to be able to do that individually, to be able to do that in community, to have a group that's all doing prayer at the same time and all doing the same sorts of prayer at the same time is really powerful. Where 2 or more are gathered in my name, there's great power. And when there's a whole community that's doing the same thing, there is great power. So being able to tap into that is wonderful. Is wonderful. I didn't go to any more sessions to have somebody talk at me for an hour about what their prayer practice was. I did have the opportunity while I was wandering around the Parliament, and I was in the exhibit booths for New Thought. There are 10 organizations that were all kind of together. And I got some conversation time with people who were just wandering up, saying, well, what is New Thought? And I got to give them the elevator speech and talk about Ralph Waldo Emerson. And it was amazing how well informed and knowledgeable these people were. This young woman came up and she introduced and described herself as a pagan. And so we got into a conversation of what New Thought was about. And she thought, wow, that's a great idea. Where did this all start? So I started talking about Ralph Waldo Emerson, and she's an Emerson fan. So she knew exactly what I was talking about, and we had a context, and it was a great conversation with a pagan. And who, you don't necessarily expect that. I had another technique where I was staying in a hotel that was attached to the convention center. So I got on the elevator in the hotel because I'm going to go down and then walk a half a mile to the exhibit halls. If there was somebody in the elevator with me who had their Parliament credential on, I just struck up a conversation with them because I knew, well, we got 25 minutes of walking. And it was wonderful. I had a great conversation with a Baha'i. And that's one of the religions that I don't know that much about. So it was wonderful to talk to somebody who's in the tradition and understands the difference between what the religion says up at the top and the way that she's living it in her real world, and honoring the traditions but not necessarily agreeing with everything. It's like talking to a Catholic. The Catholic Church has some pretty serious rules about everything. But there are also a lot of Catholics who are able to be devout Catholics and love what they're doing and live by the teaching and the philosophy and the doctrine and not follow all the rules. Mm-hmm. I went to the free lunch served by the Sikhs on the last day, and I sat down next to a guy, and I said, well, what tradition are you with? He says, the Roman Catholic Church. And I said, oh, the one true religion. I've heard of you guys.
Did he laugh?
He did.
Did he?
Oh, yeah. Had a great sense of humor. Well, and this was the Catholic guy who went to the Parliament of the World Religions. So he's not pretending that there's one true religion and nothing else exists. He was all about finding out how to reach out and connect. I mean, that's actually his job. He's based in New York City, and his job is to be involved in the cross connection between the different religions. And he came up with a brilliant and not particularly surprising idea. There was an epiphany for him. He says, I think we got to do it through the mystics, because the mystics in every tradition are all saying the same thing. It's the people who built religions out of them that have different ideas. To which I thought, amen, brother, and this is a great time for the Catholics to notice that.
When you were talking about meeting people and how the conversations would flow, the one thing that you mentioned the person that was pagan, and you mentioned Emerson, and she could relate to that.
Yeah.
And I thought about how I tried to create an entry point for conversation Let me clearly say I'm not an evangelist, but when it comes to speaking, I try to find a place where we can agree.
Hmm.
And Emerson is one, Plato in philosophy is another. So
Yep.
those are people that are non-threatening places to meet. Crossroads, it feels to me. And because when you say Plato, you think about philosophy, but you don't think about religion.
Right.
But it to me there's a marriage, and so then the conversation begins. So I can imagine that happened a lot where you were that week.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of rich opportunity to have conversation. And I wasn't trying to convince anybody of anything. I was there to share and talk about New Thought to anybody who was interested. And especially the people who are in the different New Thought organizations, because I'm all about cross-connecting the people at Unity with the people at Agape, with the people at Centers for Spiritual Living, with the people at Divine Science, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the leaders and a lot of the people who are active in those denominations or sections of New Thought were there. And it was wonderful to just be able to spend time together with them in a relatively unstructured framework. When they're at their exhibit booth, we set it up so that all the booths were open to each other. And so we had a chance to just kind of wander around and cross-connect. And to me, that's wonderful. And if we can get somebody who's part of Unity to understand, the Affiliated New Thought Network is a place where people from all over New Thought can get together, then that's a win. So, and that was an unusual one, because there are actually people who are real good candidates for the organization that I'm involved in to get involved in it. Same thing with the International New Thought Alliance. There are groups that are bringing different people together, and the more we can do that, the better. Across the aisle from us was the Swedenborgians.
Wow.
Yeah, and they're kind of New Thought. They're New Thought with an asterisk, because Ralph Waldo Emerson was a Swedenborgian. And they claim him as one of their success stories. So, all right, we're sharing a lineage here.
Which we do in so many ways. We find that lineage connection in more places than people would imagine.
Yep.
And then you argue with that.
There was a wonderful presentation. I thought it was like 3 minutes long. It turned out it was about 8 or 9 minutes. It was a keynote that Marianne Williamson did. And one of the points that she made is that religion is radical. That once we have a religion, we can become radical, and we can bring these ideas, the 5 ideas of the global ethic, into our world through our religion, and be passionate and radical about it. And really cool idea. And she says, don't worry about the people who are going to be trying to beat you up, because they're going to be people. She says, if you think it's bad in religion, try going into politics.
Yeah, I was reading about her. She was going to run for president.
She was running for the nomination last time around. Didn't end the way that she wanted it to. Let's do another break, and then we will do a prayer based on our awareness, understanding, and commitment to the best ideas of all the religions.
Get inspiration in an instant. God calls are the gentle and uplifting moment of truth to help you remember that the bright light of God's love is shining right now as you.
It's your God Call with Reverend Bill.
Start your 2-week free trial today, and you'll get a phone call 4 times a week from Reverend Bill with an uplifting half-minute message filled with insight, wisdom, story, and fun.
Let your light shine.
You can answer the call to listen to it live, or let it go to voicemail so you can hear it later. After the free trial, your subscription is just $5.95 a month. The details are at godcall.org. God calls are disruptive, intentionally.
Whenever you write something, put on a gold star.
They take you away from your routine to remind you about the truth of who you really are. They come at random times between 8:15 a.m. and 6 p.m., so you won't be expecting them. And somehow, the message is exactly what you need to hear at the time.
Magic is loose in the world.
It's a moment of motivation in the middle of your day. Find out more and start your 2-week free trial now at godcalled.org.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchiony. And
We've been having a wonderful conversation about,
amazing.
the thread between all the religions of the world. And we have so much in common. And what we have in common is belief. We believe that there's something bigger going on. And that, by the way, includes atheists. Because to be an atheist, you have to have a framework for what it's not. And even that is a framework. So let's do a prayer on the best idea of all the religions. Let's let go of the idea that whatever path that we've been on, whatever practice we've been doing is the best one ever. It is completely possible that we're right, that this is the best thing we ever have had. And it's also possible that there's an and, that there is this that I've come to understand already, this practice that I've come to be doing on a daily or hourly basis, and there's something that can be added onto it from another tradition, from another perspective, from another idea. And maybe it's the concept of service, of someone who is all about serving other people. Maybe it's about bringing compassion into the world. Maybe it's about being a way shower for peace. Maybe it's about praying multiple times a day, 5 times a day, to polish our heart. Whatever that next great, grand, wonderful idea is, let us open to that new possibility. And we do that by turning away from the details in the world around us and opening to that infinite creative intelligence, that one divine presence and power that creates everything. It's God, it's spirit, it's nature, it's Allah, it is the source, it is whatever it is that we want to call it. It is that one from which everything flows. And it shows up in so many, many different ways. It individualizes and particularizes itself as each and every one of us. Everyone within the sound of my voice is an expression of the divine taking his or her or its own particular form. And all of those pieces are fitting together in sweet perfection. God doesn't do any second-rate work. So if there's something that's showing up that looks different than what I'm used to, instead of saying there's something wrong with it, there's the possibility that there's something to be offered by that. Maybe I can take this new idea and incorporate it into what's true of me and allow my awareness of love to rise, to allow the light that I'm shining to brighten, to allow the way that I'm engaging in the world to be uplifted. Whatever that new possibility is, I'm now calling on that guidance to take those next steps, to have the best ideas of any and all of the religions, of other practices, of people who look and seem separate or distinct from me or from each of us, to allow the good, the love, the light that they're bringing to be made visible and understandable and acceptable in a way that allows more good and more love to come into the world. So I claim now that it's not nearly so much about me as it is about us. There is a group, there is a community, there is an opportunity for this light, for this love, for this goodness to shine even more brightly through each of us individually and through all of us together. So that's what I'm calling on. I'm calling on this goodness to unfold in new and dramatic and wonderful and joyous ways. Pleasant and harmonious and uplifting, and as good as we could have expected, and even better. And I'm grateful for the wonderful ways that it's showing up. I'm grateful for the newness that is each of us. And I'm grateful to be able to speak this word and release it into that creative law that has created everything, and to know with absolute certainty that it is now creating this. This good, this enlightenment, this uplift is underway now. And so I let it be. And so it is. Amen.
The Practical Prayer Podcast with Reverend Bill Marchiony and Carol Lawrence is a production of BeTheLight.com,
be-the-light.com,
where you can find more information about practical prayer for real results.
Our theme is by Music of Wisdom. You can learn about the spiritual community of New Thought Philadelphia with daily guided meditations,
weekly celebrations of spirit,
and Reverend Bill's classes in practical spirituality
at newthoughtphilly.org.
That is Practical Prayer Podcast, episode number 118.
118?
Number 118.
Is that what you said?
Yep,
118.
118.
I'm going to start putting this on my calendar.
Why?
Because every time you say a number, I'm just like, wow.
Okay.
I put it on my calendar so I, like, it should be, okay, yeah, by now. I'm still just kind of wowed that it's been that long. And we've missed just about what you can count on one hand.
We started out with a bunch of them in the can, and we have at this point done one rerun. So this episode will air a week from Wednesday. If I get it to our editor before he goes on vacation. So yeah, but very consistent. I'm not sure what we're going to do the week that I'm at the Affiliated New Thought Network retreat, the first week in October, because that's usually when we record. So that might be another week where we get a rerun. Or maybe since the retreat won't have started by then, I'll just do it from the hotel room.
Well, what did we do last year?
Last year we used one of our leftovers.
Okay.
We stretched those out for a while.
You will figure that out.
Oh yeah, you can see the little wheels turning up here.
Yeah, but I sure will.
And it'll be perfect. And the rerun that we did, I mean, I loved the episode that we got to rebroadcast, which was an unlikely duo, which I think might be either this week or it's on this week or was dropped last week. Yeah, that was episode number 5 originally.
Okay.
And I told you about that one, right?
Yes.
You were proudly claiming to be a card-carrying control freak.
Yes, I know.
Yeah, it was fun.
I know.
And did you listen back to it?
No. No.
Okay. No, it might be fun. You might find yourself saying the same things to yourself that I said to myself when we first did it. Who knows? I've been hanging around the teacher for a couple of years now. See what happens.
Now that's interesting to see what well, so many things that are different, in my thinking and all of that. So I would not be surprised at any kind of changes. Not always. I mean, we agree most of the time or I should say I agree with you on most things. And sometimes it's just been a broadening of my, perspective, seeing things another way, which is always wonderful.
Yeah. And when you push back very gently.
Do I?
Oh, yes. You're very specific, but very gentle. Your teacher has noticed that.
Yeah, well, you know what? I can't remember. It might have been Buddha. I got to think about that. It talks about the relationship between the student and the teacher. And it's not like I said, okay, this is how I'm going to be. But I remember agreeing with it so much, like the student is never greater than the teacher. Even if you think you are, like you're not. Because the teacher is the teacher for the moment for a reason. Spirit put the teacher there to be the teacher. And if you ever want to be as great as your teacher, shut up so you can.
Yeah, and that said, there's a lot that teachers are learning from their students all the time. I mean, I ran a teen program for 10 years, and the stuff that I learned from the teens is still astounding. And they weren't trying to teach me anything. They were just being who they were. And I was giving them some stuff, and they were thinking about stuff, and then they would feed something back, and it's like, oh, I didn't mean that, but what did I mean? Okay, there's something there.
And that, I know it's a conversation for another time, but that is such a wonderful age. I've always loved the teenagers. Some people thought I was crazy, like, why do you they're just annoying. They're not annoying, They're, at best, goofy, and they're just stumbling all over themselves, but they don't have preconceived notions and things like that to bounce new ideas against, and the subconscious mind that says, no, you don't want to deal with that. It's just open and fresh and new, and watching them process things and ask questions
Yep.
that either I have forgotten or didn't dare to ask at that age, or wanted
Right.
to ask and didn't have the courage to. So I think the teens are wonderful.
Maybe there's an episode
But
there.
I'm not looking for a teen. I think so. That would be nice. I want to be clear. I'm not looking for a teen ministry. I think I'm past that right now. But I certainly do appreciate them. I do.
Yep. Yep. I got it. All right. Let us draw this episode to a close. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody who's listening on New Thought Media Network, or on the recording. Again, if you go to bethelight.com, be-the-light.com, there's a button there where you can make a comment or submit a question or something else where you're going to communicate with us. And we are highly likely to communicate back with you through this very New Thought Media Network channel. Great afternoon. See ya.
Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, for your continued support. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown Atlanta, for your monthly contribution. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living North Jersey, for your monthly contribution. And please help us welcome Om Center for Spiritual Living in La Mesa, California. Thank you for your monthly donation. Thank you, Center for Spiritual Living Seattle, for your most generous donation. And a special thanks to Hefferlin Foundation for your generous technology grant. And Suze Ajit, thank you for your very generous donation. And a super special thank you to Dr. Tracy Brown, RSCP. Thanks for being a super donor. And a big shout out to all our committed donors.